1, 2, 3. Go. Okay. The world is your oyster. That's what the American dream says. And that's at least what I've grown up hearing and what I intend to tell my children. But why would we set the future generations up for failure? The world is a diverse place full of lots of different people. Schools and classrooms that are of the single-sex education are not accurate representations of the real world. As a future educator, it is my responsibility to prepare my students and provide them with a complete education. But by this, I mean exposing them to real-life situations and being able to ready them. Today, I intend to persuade my classmates that a co-ed education is more beneficial by explaining the problems with a single-sex education, by showing that boys and girls can learn from each other, and by encouraging change. First, I think it's essential to understand that by separating boys and girls in the education world, we put them behind in the real world. Aristotle said that humans are social animals. When given the opportunity, boys and girls will explore social interactions and be able to develop further in that area. Simple exposure to the other gender teaches children to gain comfort and confidence. In addition, gender is one of the most basic differences among people. Today we are still fighting the gender gap in places where women strive to be seen as equal as men. If we're separating kids in an early developmental age, then we are probably leading them to separation later on in life. Boys and girls may think differently, but that's not all a bad thing. In addition, there can be a lot learned from one gender to the next. The point has been made often that a co-ed education encourages competition between the genders. But if you think about it, eventually boys and girls will be competing for the same jobs anyways. In a quote from an article by Our Kids, it says that having boys and girls in the classroom creates balance, which benefits both. Where boys excel, they raise the standard for girls and vice versa. Diversity allows students to stretch and challenge each other. When you leave boys and girls in the same classroom, they are introduced to what they are not naturally equipped for, and by way, they are able to add another tool to their belt. Single-gender classrooms might be able to further refine an education for a student, but they're going to miss out on what other students could teach them. Finally, I'd like to address the real issue that I see at hand. It's often debated that co-ed educations are in schools and in classrooms are prime areas for distractions and for suppression to arise. Further down in the article by Our Kids, it says that girls who attend single-sex schools outscore their counterparts on the SAT by an average of 28 to 43 points, and nearly 100% of girls' school graduates go on to college. In an article in the Washington Post, Valerie Strauss interviews Ashley Lamb Sinclair, who's a former educator and also the CEO/co-founder of Curio Learning. In the interview, she tells Strauss about a time when a teaching assistant encouraged her own young daughter, or she praised her for being both good and quiet. The real issue that I see is not with our children and the stereotypes, but instead in our teaching. In the wise words of Julius Campbell, attitude reflects leadership. Teachers need to be actively aware about the stereotypes and gender roles that take place in the classroom. That way they can work to counteract them. In closing, I've explained the disadvantages of a single-sex education. I've explained how boys and girls can learn from each other, and I've drawn attention to the root of the issue that I think a single-sex education strives to solve. But instead, teachers can solve that gap by becoming more aware about the stereotypes and the gender roles in their classrooms. They can provide a complete and undeterred education for every single student. I'll leave you with this. Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world." It will take both men and women to change the world, so they might as well start working together from a very young age. Don't turn it off yet. 1, 2, 3.